We have finally arrived at the cornerstone of all the building blocks, comprehension. Comprehension really is the reason for reading. It is not enough for students to be able to read words or read words quickly. They must be able to comprehend their meaning in context to be proficient in reading. If you have not yet read the selection provided on handout 1, please stop this video and do so now. When you are finished, please answer the following 2 questions. Based on your reading, explain the relationship between flavors and hadron properties as it relates to the quark model. Use your own words. 2. Provide an example of an effective test for non-perturbative QCD. Explain why you chose this test. So how did you do? I know you're all skilled readers. Was it difficult for you to answer these questions? Why do you think that was? Perhaps you were not familiar with some of the vocabulary words, or maybe you lacked the necessary background knowledge. Maybe you lost interest after reading the first paragraph because you weren't engaged in the material. Think about the readers in your classroom. Do you have students that struggle with comprehension? Why do you think they may be having difficulty? Do you have students who easily give up when the reading gets tough? If so, you're not alone. Think about the kind of comprehension strategies you tried to use when reading this text. Which ones did you use? Which ones do you teach in your classroom or know about? According to the National Reading Panel, teaching a combination of reading comprehension techniques is the most effective. In other words, there is no one perfect or right comprehension technique that all readers should do. Second, when students use comprehension techniques appropriately, they assist in recall, question answering, question generation, and summarization of text. The reading panel also found that when reading comprehension techniques are used in combination, these can improve results in standardized comprehension tests. And a final key finding of the National Reading Panel was that teachers should be provided with appropriate and intensive training to ensure that you know when and how to teach specific strategies. Let's talk about some of these evidence-based comprehension strategies. For the purposes of our microlecture, we will focus on 5: cooperative learning, comprehension monitoring, the use of graphic organizers, answering questions, and summarization. First, cooperative learning is a successful teaching strategy in which small teams use a variety of learning activities to improve their understanding of a subject. Cooperative learning provides a sense of positive interdependence. In other words, we sink or swim together. It involves opportunities for face-to-face interaction, where we can promote each other's success. There is individual and group accountability, or there should be in any cooperative learning activity. It promotes the development of interpersonal and small group skills, and it is also an excellent resource for group processing. We can learn from each other. Some examples of cooperative learning techniques that you might already use are jigsaw, literature circles, reciprocal teaching, or learning partners. First, comprehension monitoring is knowing when you're not comprehending and knowing what to do about it. In other words, having your toolkit ready. Readers need to have a plan and use fix-up strategies when something doesn't make sense. Next, the use of graphic organizers is alive and prevalent in today's classrooms. Some examples of graphic organizers that you might already use are story maps, Venn diagrams, sequence charts or chain of events charts, or problem solution diagrams. Where can you find these graphic organizers, a search of the internet will lead you to many different types, varieties, and styles. Answering questions is another important comprehension strategy. When we think about questions, we need to think about the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, from the knowledge level all the way up to the synthesis and evaluation level. If you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, you might want to search for that on the internet as well. Question-answer relationships, or the QAR strategy, is a very effective teaching technique for answering and asking questions, and will be covered later in this module. Remember, students should have opportunities to ask their own questions, not just answer the questions that you, the teacher, poses to them. And speaking of you, make sure your questions are not all low-level, knowledge-based, basic recall types of questions. It's very important that we stretch the thinking of all of our learners. And last, summarization is a key comprehension strategy that students will need to know for the rest of their lives. We start the teaching of summarization with retelling. Retelling is an appropriate strategy for kindergarten through second grade. In a retelling, students are expected to tell everything that happened in order. And retelling is also covered later in this module in the assessment folder. After retelling, it is important to move to summarizing. Remember, retelling is about telling it all, where in a good summary, students try to give the gist of the story in as few words as possible. Think about the blurb on the back of a book or the inside flap, or for a great example of a summary, check on the information page in the front of the book where sometimes the Library of Congress summary is printed. That is an example of a short and sweet summary. In conclusion, please remember this: reading without meaning is not really reading. Comprehension is our ultimate goal and the real reason for reading.